But what I want to do is I want to pitch you a scene. I'm going to pitch it like how I pitch. And then what we can do is we can just dissect it together. I can talk about like why the choices I made, why I made those choices. We can look for some of those mechanics that we had discussed the first week and how they're playing out here and how I'm using them, whether successfully or not. We'll see. So Wish Dragon, the original movie, is essentially a retelling of Aladdin in modern day Shanghai. So this scene, the boy finds, the boy and the movie opens with a boy and his best friend and their little kids. And the girl's family becomes rich overnight in Shanghai, in China, which is a very common occurrence now. So her family essentially moves to the castle, the rich side of town, and he's ripped apart from his friend when they're kids. And so we meet the boy in modern day, and the whole movie is about him trying to reconnect with this lost friend. But of course, they come from different, they live in different, they run in different circles now, different social classes. He's lower class, she's, elite rich. So the whole story is about him trying to make his way back to her. He finds a wish dragon, which is essentially a genie. And the whole conflict, the main core of the movie is the conflict between this genie and the boy. And the genie, the dragon, Long, he basically, his whole philosophy is the only thing that matters in life is money and wealth and power. And the boy says, no, you're completely wrong. The only thing you need in life is friends and family and love. And so that's the main conflict of the whole movie. So this scene that I was tasked to board is the first time the boy reconnects with the girl is at a very fancy party. And of course, in order to get into the party, the boy has to wish for the suit and the money. He has to wish to look the part. So he uses a wish to look fancy and essentially be a prince just to reconnect with her. But she doesn't remember him, and he gets caught in a lie where he is now pretending to be rich. So he's really excited that he just got to reconnect with her. But of course, the dragon is leaving that party thinking, yeah, but I'm right. You had to use money. You had to use, money and wealth and power. This would have never happened. So that was the point of this scene is they're flying home. The boy's super excited that he got to reconnect with her. But the dragon is basically saying, yeah, but the only reason is because I'm right. And the boy is sort of sticking up for his guns. No, I'm still right. You'll see. So that's what this scene was. So we had some script pages, but I'm pretty sure we just kind of talked it out in the launch, like when they were launching me the sequence. So I think a lot of it was just kind of rewritten on the fly to incorporate gags and fun kind of stuff. So they are leaving this party from this fancy mansion. So we see them coming up to the Shanghai skyline, and the boy's riding on the back of the dragon. And then we were dancing, and she didn't remember me, but we passed notes under the door, and she told me all of her problems, and I listened to all of her problems. And then her dad came in, and her dad really likes me. And then the dragon comes up. I think he drank out of a toilet or something by accident, so he's all mad about that. So he's like, I can't believe you didn't tell me what a toilet was. And then she's having me over for dinner tomorrow, and everything's going to plan. This is great. And the dragon looks back. So part of your plan was to lie to her? Well, I mean, I didn't plan to. It just happened. I'll come clean when the time is right. About being rich, about not being rich. Screech to a halt. You're not going to come clean because there is no right time. Look, kid, I get it. You're the peasant. She's the princess. It's a tale as old as time, and we all know how that ends. Good? No, not good. Terribly. You live in separate worlds. It's never going to work. Oh, long. I wouldn't. You have no faith in humanity. He's like dangling his little feet off the end of Long. Of course not. I've been around 1,000 years. I know how the world works. Long. Stop patting me. I wouldn't expect your tiny reptilian brain to understand the power of human friendship. What? I understand friendship. I had 1 million friends before I was a dragon. Boop, 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 boop. And he makes all these fingers, and then he realizes, sigh. Turns his head around. Long? Were you human? Yes! Of course I was human! For heaven's sake, haven't you ever looked at the teapot, you idiot? Huh? And he shoves it in his face, and we see these like hieroglyphic Chinese drawings of this like man turning into a dragon. See? Human me turning into a magical wish dragon me! Can your tiny, feeble human mind comprehend that? Whoa. What were you before human? I started as a human, and I was the best human ever, the most beloved and respected emperor in the history of China. And he's towering over the boy. And you know why? Because you had a lot of friends? No! Because I had all the wealth, and all the land, and all the power, and everyone loved me for it. And he makes this little nod, and we're shooting through the knot. Wait, if you were such a great emperor, why haven't I heard of you? Huh? Well, obviously, some sort of jealous emperor took credit for everything I accomplished after I died, wrote me out of history. So you died, and then the heavens made you a wish dragon? Yes, as a reward. You don't seem very happy with your reward. I'm very happy with my reward. I love my reward, which is being a magical wish-granting dragon, or in layman's terms, someone who can solve all of your problems. So, if you would just use your last wish to wish for the same thing like every buddy else, and he makes all this gold, all around him, every other master, then everyone will be your friend. You can reconnect with the girl. She can marry the girl. You can have your own suit, have your own mansion, and a real car, and a chauffeur. Then I can be done with my master and go finally leave this wretched world once and for all. And he pulls him off, and finally return to the spirit world where everyone is waiting for me with a giant parade. He's screaming, giant parade to welcome the great emperor home. Whoa, they have parades in heaven? He pulls him closer. Look, kid, are you going to make the wish or not? So, 1,000 years, and that's what works. Money? Yes. And then we hear a clock, bong, and we look over, and they're conveniently placed in front of a giant digital clock. Bong, bong, bong. Ah, Long! My mom's gonna be home. We gotta get home. Crap! Go, 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 go! Takes off. They take off. Now they're going down from the skyline, the glitz and glamour, to the slums where he lives. And the last thing we see as he descends is him looking back at sort of the wealth and the towers as he goes back home. So that's the scene. So why don't I just talk through it as we go, and you guys can just ask questions or chime in as we go. So my initial thought for this scene was they're leaving a party and the boy's on a high, and at the end, through the context of the scene, he's actually not going, like, by the end of it, he's not excited anymore because he's realizing that the dragon's sort of poking holes in everything that just happened. So my initial thought was like, oh, I should start the scene where they're kind of going up, like excited. And of course, you going towards, even though like they're coming from a mansion, which is glitz and glamour, like they're heading up, towards the skyline, the lights and everything. And then by the end of the scene, they're going down. So that was like my first bookend of the shot of the sequence, was like a very clear in and out. That's like representing the boy's trajectory internally through, like, how do I do that visually? So at the beginning, they're going up. He's super excited. And then if you remember, the last two shots now, they descend now down. So the boy's on a downward slope internally, emotionally. And of course, the last shot going away from the lights and the glamour. And the shot before, you would see sort of the more slums and the more, they're called shinkumen or shikumen, which is like older Beijing like condominiums that are all just like stacked together. So they're heading back towards that. So that was like my first thought. So even before I got into the context of the scene, I had an in and an out where I was like, that's what I want to do. So with that in mind, I just kind of kept that in mind in the staging. So they're going up. We kind of have the boy on the left and the dragon on the right for most of the scene. And one of the things I thought would be fun is, like, since he flies in sort of a serpentine, I wanted to do this thing where those two characters are at odds right now. So instead of just doing a shot where you see both characters at the same time, like we could have easily staged this where you see Long and the boy, the dragon and the boy. But I thought what would be funny is this sort of seesaw effect where it's like, boy's happy, 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 happy. Dragon comes in, grumpy, grumpy, grumpy. Boy comes back in, happy. So it's kind of this like uneven, like they're still going, they're together, but you can tell I'm trying to physically represent that they're not on the same page. They're not like together. They're not clicking right now. So the boy's excited. So you can see here left and right, even though, right, it's subtle, but I'm favoring him left, right? So he's left here. Okay, so left and right, we cut to the dragon, turns. So part of your plan was to lie. Huh? I didn't plan to lie. It just happened. I'll come clean when the time is right. Screech, they screech to a halt. Dragon comes up and we cut on action. So here's an example where, okay, so we're flying. So you can see those zip lines I made, right? Like, again, that was like one of those examples I showed you. Didn't take a lot of work. It's not a lot of drawing, but it helps this moment. It makes it feel more like there's a little more energy. It's a little more kinetic. Then when we stop, I just put a little motion blur to just like kind of create this sort of effect of like screeching to a halt. And I could have done this shot where the boy just looks up and we cut, but I thought would be interesting is to introduce the dragon into this shot, kind of going over him, and we cut on that action. So if you see that, you can feel it. So see how that motion sort of continues over those two shots there. So it just helps make that shot feel a little more organic, right? It just feels comfortable for the eye. The motion sort of in the same, if you like kind of put your finger on the screen, you'll see like where the motion is occurring by the time we cut. See, it's kind of like you're kind of picking up right in a similar spots. So the eye doesn't have to do a lot of business, doesn't have to do a lot of work to kind of figure out where we're looking next. So cutting on action there. Then I punched out here. I felt like, what he's saying here is you're not going to come clean because there is no right time. Look, kid, I get it. You're the peasant, she's the princess. And so the reason I wanted to cut out here is because I thought maybe we could do this thing where we put that skyline to the one side, and he's on the other. So the dragon would have something to gesture to, as they're talking. And again, one of the fun things about the scene in general was that they were flying. So we kind of have them suspended in air, which is already like really fun. Like it just makes a normal conversation even more fun that they're just like floating in the middle of the middle of the sky in Shanghai. But I definitely wanted to like find ways to take advantage of that. So, this was one of my thoughts. Like, let's cut out here. She's the princess. You're the peasant. It's a tale as old as time. And we all know how that ends. So it's like he's kind of telling a story and I cut out. And I just thought that was fun to see more of the environment. Now we kind of cut to the dragon's POV, right? So the dragon, you can see here, he goes from up, down, looking right at the boy. And then we essentially cut to the dragon's eyes, right? And the boy says, good. And again, it's subtle, but the dragon's kind of berating the boy and talking down to him a little bit. And so I could have done that shot where we could have made it a little more flat, but I really felt like looking down on him, we're putting the audience in the dragon's shoes right now, which is he is looking down at this boy physically and sort of internally, mentally. Like he is berating this boy. He's basically telling him, you are dumb. Your worldview isn't right because mine's right because I know everything because I've been around forever. So finding ways to stage that. So then I cut back to a flat shot. I don't know. I just thought for the acting, it made sense. It was fine. So now the boy, goes into this little very childish, like, oh, you have no faith in humanity. So this was like a fun little, business, like a fun little character thing, just sitting on his side, dangling his feet like a kid would do in a pool or something. So I was just trying to find business here. And if you notice, the boy kind of is trying to level the playing field right now with his sort of, the boy's trying to be condescending now. So instead of going back to that down shot, I thought maybe that's what I was thinking here too. Is like, okay, the dragon's made his stance known, looking down. But now that we're going back into more of a back and forth, I think maybe now I'm going a little more, they're sort of a little more on the same plane right now with the boy trying to stand up for his point of view. So that everything's a little more, these shots are a little more flat in a sense of not really up or down, just kind of putting their eye line sort of on the same plane right now. So I know how the world works. Then this to me is a cut that's not motivated. But I think, I don't know. I think it's fine. It's like, not every single shot has to be motivated. I'm thinking about it like I actually probably could have stayed behind here for the whole time and just done all this stuff from behind. And where he's saying, oh no, I know how the world works. I've been, or whatever. I could have just stayed behind here and maybe pulled out or adjusted up as long as talking, and he turns his back. So, you know, in hindsight, like, yeah, there's probably other things I could have done, but let's see. So long. So now that I did this shot, I was like, let's have a funny little gag, you know. So whoop, the dragon's head would come in, stop patting me. Again, this is a little bit of a jump here. I suspect in animation or in layout, maybe they would have bridged that gap. Maybe have the boy start to lean over or something, just to get into this a little more. But again, it's not wrong. It's just it just pops a little bit, I think. What do you guys think? Like, does that cut bump you?
No, you're fine. Also, you're getting flatter because there's something funny happening.
Yeah, that's part of it too.
To have something funny.
Yeah. So Jim brings up a point, which is like this sort of is a very cartoony, right? Like flat silhouette. Boink. If you were shooting that from above or below, you lose a lot of the comedy when you have too much like perspective. It's just not as funny. And like a lot of times in cartoons, like if you have like, let's say someone's getting bonked with a hammer, if you do it like from profile and it's like bunk, it's super funny. But if you're the camera and someone's doing this right at the camera, it's not funny. It's horrifying. So it's like, you know, that's something to like think about. Like, you can do comedy in perspective. Like, you know, I think we had that. There was like that. It was just really a line, but it was that. We all know how that ends. Good. Where'd that go? I don't know. We'll get to it later. But
comedy is flat, and action and drama can have a lot of camera angles and fun that way.
Yeah,
but it's just always funnier if you keep it flat.
So I went super flat because I just thought this was really condescending, and I wanted it to be very funny. Boink, your reptilian brain to understand. I cut on action here. So this is like a little jumpy, that cut to me. But anytime you're like not sure, the best way to bridge a cut is just cut on action or carry over some sort of motion. I think what I'm sensing is the size of the boy is a little similar here to here. So maybe in layout, we maybe, you know, pull out a little more so that the size difference of that character over the cut is a little more exaggerated in the cut, which just makes it feel a little more organic. Then I went straight to the boy's POV. I just think this is funny, right? Like he's lying, you know, it's like, this is one of those things where like, you know, I went through the trouble of having the boy lying down and going to this funny pose. Use it, you know, use that now. So we've created this new axis. The boy, you know, Bob looking right up at the dragon. And then we essentially just cut to the boy's eyes for this. I understand friendship. I had a million friends before I was a dragon. And this is a big reveal in the movie, you know. So then the boy reacts. So here's like, this is one of those things we talked about, rack focus, right? So so the boy reacts. I cut out here. The point of this cut, even though it's not motivated specifically, is getting more information from Long, because the audience is curious now. We know something's happening, so they want to see Long. So he sighs, but then I decided instead of having too many cuts here, just introduce the boy into the same shot. And then rack so that we lose focus, so that your attention isn't distracted by Long anymore. So, you know, I kind of push him out of the focus and bring in the boy. Then he starts to turn around, and then his head's all the way around. Long, were you human? I think in the actual movie, I think they combined this into one shot or two. Like, I think I have 3 shots here. So there's Din's reaction, Long, Din, then this. I think they combined it into just one of those in the movie. It's just one of those things when you get into layout, you can just kind of maybe find something that maybe you don't need an extra shot rhythmically or something. So, yes, it says. And if you notice, guys, like the whole time, this whole thing, left and right? Like very strong left and right. The boy's always favored left. The dragon's always favored right. You don't have to do that in every scene, right? Like we had talked about, if you have a character move and you show it move, that's fine. Then you swap sides. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to have these 2 characters on opposite sides of the screen both times, like because they're far apart in terms of their mental sort of where their world views, their philosophies. So I was very adamant about I'm not going to have them ever cross over really. So that it's very strong left and right the whole time. So jams the teapot in his face. We see what the boy's saying. So that's a bit of a cheat, right? Like it's like way in the boy's face, and then I cut and you can see it. So it works as a cut. Maybe in layout, the boy starts closer and kind of retracts a little bit to reveal that information. The dragon's, talking about the transformation. So see, if you see here, so like I needed the dragon, this line, can you understand that? Can your feeble human mind comprehend that? He's referring to something that the boy said to him earlier in the scene, which was like, I don't think your reptilian brain can understand that. So I was like, you know what? I think it's important that you see the dragon's face for that line, because he's going to be he's going to be mad. He's going to be talking down to the boy. So I wanted to make sure, like, I was like, okay, how do I get the dragon in here now? I guess maybe he can go up. Or I thought, we've got this sort of horizontal sort of composition going, and the dragon's hand goes that way. See, human me to magical me, and then his head comes out, and we just continue that action all the way over. So I just felt like that was a fun way, instead of having to use a cut, just move things, readjust for the action. So, but again, the character's motivating that, right? Like we're going out with the character, so we adjust as the character. Can your feeble human mind comprehend that? Then I cut to sort of like, this was like this to me is, Long is such a fun character because he's so serpentine that you can do all these fun stuff. Like this is like an over the shoulder, under the neck kind of a thing where, his arms are on one side. He's kind of like surrounding the boy, starting to suffocate the boy, which is like he's suffocating him with his, worldview also. But because he's got this fun body, we can do all these fun shapes. So I just thought this was a really fun opportunity to like create a composition, focus on the boy, stage it fun, use the character, use the Long's body. So, whoa, what were you before human? Then I cut to sort of more of a neutral. I started as a human. And then I sort of, you can even see I cheated my way out of this. Like the dragon's hands are gone, the teapot's gone, which is, not hooking up from here. That's something they might address in layout, or Long is magical, who fucking cares? So maybe you just don't even notice it. So I'd actually be curious. I don't know what they did in layout. I can't recall. So maybe his arms are there and then he just kind of goes into stuff like this. So these two shots then are sort of a, continuation of some of those motifs I was using earlier with the dragon sort of being over the boy. So he's, really laying into the boy now. I was the best human ever, the most beloved, and really, the shadows going over the boy. So he's really drowning out the boy now, with his, what he thinks is right. Now it's a super close up, like we're, I put the boy's head here. You might not even need that. We could essentially pretend to be the boy's eyes and just have the dragon right in our face. So again, that's kind of a layout choice at the end of the day. Then this, again, see, even in these tight shots, I'm still doing left and right? Like really close attention to left and right. Now here's a flat shot. And I don't know why I did this. Let's see. Because you have a lot of friends. No. So I had all the wealth and all the land and all the power, and everybody loved me for it. I think I just wanted some real estate for the dragon to do some acting. So again, cut out to kind of a flat shot. But even with my acting, again, look, still kept him on the right and the boy on the left. It's subtle, but it's implied. So now I gave him some real estate to do some acting. And then this is a thing, this was like this concept, like a philosophy that we kind of came up with for Long as we were boarding. And it's something we discovered in board, which is like the more frustrated and the more annoyed he gets as a character, the more complex his shapes become. So I wanted to illustrate that here, where you guys might not know it at the time, but he's actually kind of lying and kind of spinning a little bit of a tale. He's not being honest about his past. And so what I thought was fun was like, when you're lying, there's that expression, you're like tying yourself in knots, or you're like, you're circling around yourself, or whatever it is. So I thought like it was fun to try to create this shape where it's like really complicated, and you're as an audience, you're probably wondering if this is true or not. And then this is sort of a physical manifestation of like, he's trying really hard to like make this true or whatnot. And then what I decided to do was use that shape for the cut. So like, again, I created this like little loop in the dragon's body. We create an axis through there, and then I basically just go around to the other side and like, use what you have. So I used this to like silhouette the boy. So like, this is one of those things, remember we talked about like, don't give the audience a choice about where they're looking, right? Make them look. There is no doubt about where you're supposed to be looking when you cut here. Like, you have no choice but to look at the boy. I blocked everything else out. I made it blurry. He's right in the middle. Like, there's no confusion about what is important here. And it's important because this is when the boy starts poking holes in the like, wait, so if you were great, why haven't I heard of you, right? Back up to the dragon. Now he's kind of pacing. So this is actually the first time in the whole scene where the dragon's on the left side. And when did I do that? It's when the dragon is actually backpedaling and trying to catch up and trying to, prevent the boy from really understanding, what was happening here. So very subtle. No one in the audience is ever going to be, oh my God, he's on the left side now. He must be lying. But for me, it's one of those things that it's very, very subtle. But I like it. Now back to left and right. So the boy, just a close up for the boy. He's, trying to put this together. You don't seem very happy with your reward. Dragon comes in. I'm very happy. I love my reward. Pulls up his body. Name return someone who could solve all your problems. If you would just use your last wish and wish for the same thing like every. So their whole arc, he's always just basically like, kid, just wish for gold and get this over with. Just wish for money, get this over with. Just, so that's what this moment is meant to represent. I think what happened was, I think there was a version of this where I had a couple more shots in here that got taken out. And so when I look at this now, I probably would have been wider here. And it's probably what they did in layout. But I think what I did was I was just reusing panels I'd already done. We were probably in a rush to get this done. And I figured, you know what? It's enough for the storyboards. But the biggest one for me is this cut here, where it like, I used the gold to mask the screen, which is cool. But that cut, the boy here to here, is too similar in size for me. I don't like that. I don't think it works. I don't think it's very successful. So ultimately, if I went to layout with this, I would be like, hey guys, on this shot, let's field out, let's pull out. So we see more of the gold and we're also farther away from the boy, so that when we do fill the screen with that gold, we're actually farther away. And then this punch in feels a little more organic, like there's more distance. The cut's more warranted because we're a little farther away. So again, one of the things I did here, so I covered up the screen, and I wanted you to see the boy's reaction first. Then I introduced the dragon again. So I felt like that was important. I didn't want it. The boy is also absorbing this. So I felt like I didn't want both of those things going at the same time and have your eye, splitting your eye between what you're looking at. I thought, you know what? The dragon's up above him. So he makes the last gold, fill the screen, cut. Let's see the boy first, then sort of going into this, bring the dragon in, and even as the boy turns. So again, now we're done with the boy. We're seeing what he's absorbed, how he's feeling, turns, leads us back to the dragon. So the dragon can continue his sort of onslaught here. And then I can be done. My masters. Leave this wretched world once and for all. Pulls the boy off. And finally return back to the heavens where everyone is waiting. So this is an example, like we had talked about, of like unlocking Z space, right? Like you could definitely do this gag with cutting, but I was like, I don't want to. I want to so I even restaged it. Like we start I even restaged it internally in the shot. So I staged it for just kind of like a conversation. Then I had the dragon's tail come up, pull the boy. And if you notice what I'm doing, it's fun. It's like fun action and fun business. But what I'm actually doing is restaging for a gag I wanted to do. So I pulled him completely out of, to the side of the frame, from here all the way to here to give me room to do this. And even as I do that, I adjust up with the character, again, to create more space, give more real estate for that gag. So, again, just using the Z space of the shot, using the characters to come up with a really funny gag. And I think this was at the time one of my favorite moments of the short, because especially this part, to welcome the great emperor home with a great parade. This cut to me is just like, the cut alone is funny because this is the point of this sequence. They're on completely opposite ends of this sort of philosophical spectrum. So I felt like this gag is not only funny and using the character, but also physically representative of the emotional and the internal sort of schism between these two characters. And then you add on the, whoa, they have parades in heaven? And he pulls the boy closer. So now if you notice, even when I pulled them closer, the dragon is still sort of linearly above the boy, right? Like he's a little higher. His eye line's a little higher. Even on this cut, which is kind of an over shoulder, I think I chose to stage. I didn't want to put them parallel. I kind of chose to accentuate that just a little bit. Very subtle, but has weight. There's weight to it. This dragon is weighing down on top of that boy, right? You've got all this weight of the pressure of what he's trying to tell the boy. The boy's thinking. And so this is a total emotional shot, right? And if you notice, like, one of the things that I do a lot, like, you can get away with a lot of emotion without having to redraw everything. So if you notice, the only thing that shifts during these panels is mostly just the eyes and eyebrows, right? Just the eyes and the eyebrows. There's a little bit of a mouth tweak there, but you get a lot. Then one tilt, that's it. I'm not tilting all the time, just one tilt, which is like down, and then more pupil and eyebrows and a little shrug there, but not a lot, right? It's like, it's very subtle. And what I have found is if you redraw everything every time, which I don't think any of you do, but like the more you redraw, the more that is moving on screen. So if you want just to focus on acting, like just move eyebrows and eyes and really subtle. And so many people, like after I pitch, would be like, man, that moment was so emotional. And I'm like, it's literally just lines moving. Like, that's it. Like, just lines moving like 10 degrees or like slanting. Like, that's it. But it's because I'm focusing on that, because it's the only thing that's moving. That's what people feel when you're in storyboards, when you're tapping through these. There's only two heads. There's only two head directions in this whole thing. A couple pupil looks. And this is a big trick I do a lot. Like, if a character's thinking and you want it to be emotional, they look back at the character, separate the look from the line. So like, I could lose this panel where his eyes look up and just go right from that to that, right? You could do this to this, but watch the difference. Like, it's more thought process. It's more like you're looking back to deliver a line, then you deliver the line. There's more weight to that. So again, it's not more drawing. It's not a lot more drawing. I literally just redrew the pupils. I deleted the pupils and redrew the pupils, but it adds so much in that moment. Then he proposes his question to the dragon, and again, this was one of those shots. I put him right in the center, made him big. In layout, the background would probably be a little blurry. You wouldn't see anything. This is all about the boy. So in 1,000 years, that's what you've learned works. Money, yes. The dragon's super confident. Back to the same shot. So this is, I don't know if we talked about this, but like every time you cut is new information, right? Like the background, where people are. So we talked about that. It's all information. When I first started boarding, I was like, I'm never cutting back to the same thing ever, because that's lame and like it's not inventive and it's not clever. What I didn't realize at the time is like, no, it's effective, because when the boy is absorbing this, I don't want you thinking about anything else. If I would have done a different shot, it's really subtle, but there would have been something else you're thinking about alongside the boys absorbing that. So I went back to the exact same shot, because I know you're just right there. You already know, you've already seen this shot. So you're not thinking about anything else. There's no more new information. You're right back to this. And I'm not giving the audience anything else to think about except how the boy's feeling about what the dragon just said. So again, yeah, never bad or wrong to reuse things you've used, especially if there's other things you want the audience focusing on, especially if that's dialogue or acting, right? Like, if there's something really important, don't introduce a lot of new other stuff, Okay, so then again, this was a very subtle moment. This was the director's favorite moment of the whole movie in Boards. Was the boy says "oh," and the dragon has this really subtle reaction and then back. And so essentially, the dragon, the whole point of this was the dragon is actually kind of upset that the boy is coming over to his side because he knows he's wrong. He's just not, he can't admit it yet in the story. So it's super, super subtle. But again, if you see there, look at the only things that change: eyebrows and eyes and the mouth once. That's it. The director will be on phone calls and he'll be like, it's like that moment you drew in that scene where Long's like, you like see that he really feels it, but he can't admit it. And it's all it is. Look at that. Look how little that actually moves. But it's knowing where to put those things and what those lines mean that really make that work. And then sort of the blink, which is sort of like, essentially that's sort of like a, shaking it off back to normal. But I didn't want to, it's a very emotional moment. So I didn't want him to go like, so I just did it. I just did a, an eye close and just back. So it's like on a scale of 1 to 10 of like shaking it off and focusing. That's a 1, and then is like 10. So you have that whole range that you could choose from based on where you're at. And then the idea was, they something, I don't know if this actually ends up in the movie or if they just leave. I can't remember. The idea was the director didn't want them to actually resolve the conversation. Like he didn't want the boy to be like, all right, I guess you're right. Or the dragon to be like, see, I'm right. So we just needed something that cuts them off. So they have to get out of that scene. So we don't get the resolution here because there's still more for them to discover, in other scenes. So that's one of those things like, when you're in a movie, those are the kind of things you need to know, and talk about, because you could easily have it resolve here, but there's a couple more beats that we need to unfold over the next few scenes before they're really able to like confirm one way or the other. So, we got to go. Again, the dragon turns, and again, this is another composition, like there's nothing special about this per se, but like, I've got this dragon who can do all these great things. Actually, this is a 180. I didn't even notice. I guess I'm kind of cutting on action is what I'm assuming. Anyways, like this is a shot where it's like, there's nothing particularly unique or interesting about it, but it's just fun. I'm using the dragon's shapes. He's a lot bigger than the boy, which I think ties into what, the undertones, the subtext of the scene, where the dragon's trying to overpower him. So I'm still, these are all subtle things, but they add up over time. And then they leave. And now, like we had talked about, I knew this from the beginning, what I wanted to do, put him right by those really bright lights, the nightlife, rich life, and then take him away from it. So going down. So it's the B to the A where the scene started. So watch this. This is something that's pretty cool. Everybody take your finger and put it on the boy's face right now on the screen. Watch what happens as I tap through all of these panels. Look at that. Do you see it? Does it make sense? You don't necessarily notice that when I'm pitching it, and it doesn't feel boring, right? Your eye hasn't even moved across these whole shots, but it doesn't feel boring, does it? That's eye tracking. I am manipulating where you're looking, putting all the action. So like even here on this one, you jump for a split second, but then you're back, and it's still sort of in this general space that I've created, right? So how's that? So if you're still keep holding your finger there. Let's see how long this goes. Still works there, still works there, still works there, still works there, still works there. So here the dragon turns a little bit, and that pulls us away a hair. But remember, this is the one I said I didn't like as much. This was that one shot. I was like, maybe it's unmotivated. Maybe I would do something else. So that's the one moment where I'm like, damn it, my eye moves. But again, still. So now, if you look what I did here, this is what I talked about on that jump of that cut, right? Watch what happens. So all those cuts pretty much in the same spot, fingers in the same spot, introduce new information. Our eyes go there. So, right, like that, our eyes go to the dragon. So now on the cut, it's a new focal point, right? Like now I'm actually putting the focal point where I made you look rather than keeping it in the same spot. I made you look somewhere. Now we're over there. So, Bing, your eye goes over to the dragon. The dragon says something also, which is for sure going to draw our eye there. Now we cut. And when we cut, hey, look, we're looking at what we're supposed to be, which is the dragon. Then the boy comes in. Now our eye goes back to the middle, right? Sort of back to the sort of space between the two characters, bouncing back and forth. Back to the boy. Now if you go back to the center here, right, as he falls, cutting on action, we're kind of more or less in the same place. We lose it a little bit here, but, I still think it's TV safe, right? It's sort of like still in this area. It's not going from like here to here or anything. We're still sort of tracking that. So
I have a question for you, Josh.
yes.
How far in advance do you plan your boards? Like, I was just thinking about the teapot carving shot, and how you knew that you wanted Long's face to come around the side to deliver his line
Right.
about the feeble human brain. Like, did you draw the teapot carvings and then realize you needed to get his face in there, and so then you came up with the fun, like, swooping around idea, or did you plan it all ahead of time?
Yeah, good question. So in that instance, I suspect I just made it up as I went because I kind of boarded myself into a corner by putting like putting this so big on screen. It's like, yeah, I mean, where do you go after this? You're just like so close up. So I suspect it was just like me trying to come up with a clever way around it. You could always cut, but I just like, hey, what else do I have at my disposal? When I start a sequence, for me, one of the biggest things I do is like, what's the moment? Like, what is every scene sequence normally has like one or two moments where something changes, right? Like that's the point of every sequence, right? Your characters go into a sequence, are going to go through some sort of, whether it's action or acting or drama or information, they're going to go through something, learn or change, and then exit. So every scene has, like we had talked about, every sequence has a beginning, middle, and end in the bigger beginning, middle, and end of the movie. So for me, it's like, what is the moment of this scene? And for me, the moment is when the dragon makes that discovery, when the dragon reveals that that's, that he was human, that's the big kind of reveal, which is like new information to everybody, the audience and the boy. So I start to, whatever that moment is, for whatever sequence I'm on, I start to just picture that in my head. Like, what's a cool way to do that moment? Like, is there something very specific I see? A composition, a cut? Like, is there a staging thing I want at that moment? And I don't know why. I might not know why. I just close my eyes and I just try to watch it in my head. Like, what does that moment look like? And when I kind of have an idea of that, then you can kind of reverse engineer, right? Like, if I'm like, okay, for whatever reason, in that moment, I want the dragon on the right really big and the boy on the left, and he's looking over him. Great. Now I have my general sense of, geography and screen direction that I can just thread the whole way through. When I first started, thumbnailing definitely helped. Thumbnailing was like really, really helpful. I mean, you could see here, I still, like, even as I just always have little pieces of paper with little thumbnails, and it's just super easy to see what's working really fast instead of having to spend time drawing big panels, which takes a little more time. Sometimes what I'll do is take my Photoshop file and just zoom out a whole bunch so it is really small and draw and do my thumbnails, maybe not animate them the same way I would, like maybe an A and a B, but maybe not like all the acting, but just like the shots. But when it's so small, you can't focus on the detail. So I'll just be like drawing, tapping, maybe export those as, like we had said, as JPEGs. Then not only is it like thumbnailing, but I actually have them. I can tap through them, even though they're rough. I can like tap through them, rearrange them as thumbnails, and then do a quick pass on top if I want. I personally have gotten to the point where I'll kind of just go. So what generally happens is I get launched on something. I'll spend the rest of the day just thinking. And essentially what I'm doing is thumbnailing in my head. I've just done it. I've just done it enough now where I could just sort of kind of mentally figure it out and think about it. And every once in a while, I'll do little doodles. But I'll spend a whole day and just Jim knows at Blue Sky I had a couch. I would just lie on the couch and just like close my eyes, and I would just watch the sequence in my head and just like watch it and like try to see the moment and figure it out. Sleep on it. The next day, think about it again. Think about what things really stood out, and then just start drawing. But yeah, I think if you back to your question, I guess, if you have a key moment or a key thing you really want to hit, or what the point of the scene is, there's nothing wrong with starting there and then going outward from there. I think both methods offer different results. There is something about straight ahead boarding, like that instance you talked about with the teapot. I don't know that if I thumbnailed it, I don't know that I would get that funny gag of the dragon's head coming out, because where did it go? Why can't I never find it? Because in thumbnails, I might look at that and go, "Oh, I boarded myself into a corner here. I shouldn't have done that. Cross it out and try something else." So, like in thumbnails, I may have figured out a different way to show this that was like that I felt like then I didn't need to adjust or anything. But I think on this, I don't remember exactly, but I probably just boarded straightforward. But I got this little funny moment to me that I think is fun, and the dragon we've got this dragon that can move in any direction, is magical. It's fun. It just kind of came to fruition. So a combination, I think, of both is fun. Like, I don't think, even when you have thumbnails, you might start to get into the drawing and be like, oh, actually, I could just do both lines in this one shot. I don't need this extra cut. So, like, even if you do thumbnails, like, I don't think it's something that you have to, like, adhere to as a rule. It's just getting a jump start and getting ahead of some of the issues you might run into. And just remember, this was like, I always like to say, people always like, how long did that sequence take? I'm like, this sequence took me 10 years, because it took me 10 years to get to the point where I understood all of these things and I could do all of these things without thinking about it. So, like, don't look at this and expect that, it's great if we're inspired and it's exciting, but don't ever expect to just like sit down and be like, this one's going to be the one. I remember doing that and like wanting that to happen, and it just doesn't work that way, right? You just got to do it and do it and do it. And at a certain point, you'll step back and you'll go, holy shit, I'm not thinking it. I'm not like thinking about it anymore. I'm just doing it. This is great. This is amazing. So yeah, I don't expect these things to become second nature overnight. Like I said, this sequence was 10 years. It took me 10 years to make this sequence.